Hello, Žilvinas. Žilvinas is artist based in Vilnius, but he was born in Kaunas, another city in Lithuania, and he's famous for his site-specific installations, often inspired by architecture, with Baltic nature and mythology. And he will present us his most important projects and also his different works. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for coming. Hello, Labas. We have some Lithuanians. It's very nice. I will show you first like one video. I made one, probably. I do sometimes animation, but this time it was a collaborative work. First collaborative work I did. And the last, a few years ago. And want to start with it. So we can switch off the light. It will take, I think, around 7 minutes, so we can jump, you know. It's not my work, it's based on other artists' work, and I will explain you later, but it's basically made on the footage of other artists. So that was as well a bit of a, it's like interpretation, and it's a bit of a challenge as well for the artist to use other artists' work, but I got permission from the artist, and it was very nice, and yeah. Thank you very much for some patience.
Amalgam, to je materiál, ktorý bol vymyslený.
Hello. I don't know how to skip it. How do I skip it? I need a plug for my computer. I don't know. Yeah, now it's so. This guy, come on. Shortly to say, like, why I showed this video. It's the first collaboration, as I mentioned, and we did it in 3 weeks or 2.5, and it was interesting but very difficult to work with 3 more artists. There was a sound artist, there was an animator, a graphic designer, and then there was actually a DJ, a person, one more involved, which did this kind of sampling of the music, and so the animation guy was asking, "Can we have a soundtrack so I can work on it?" But we didn't have a soundtrack, and the soundtrack people, they were saying like, "We need a video to have a soundtrack," you know. So, for example, I was including as well. I thought like, it was much faster. The idea was to make it very slow and to make a depth in the like a space in the flat surface. And just a second.
It was proposed for some exhibition, or it was part of some show?
Yeah, just I'll show you fast. Okay, how do I do the slideshow here? Is it? Yeah. So that's how it looks like now. It's a 5.5 meters high wall, and it used to be in this kind of sanatorium, like a luxury sanatorium from Soviet time. But now it's an orphanage, like it's for kids, and it's basically in very poor condition. Like, and I saw this image of these 3 guys, like a band. And I thought, why not how to make it alive, how to make it moving. So that's how it came, this idea. But in total, as you see, the structure of the spatial structure, it's like actually it's very interesting structure that it has. Each slide takes, these are the artists, but it's like the same space on different time. And I found it that it's very sculptural. At the same time, you relate with your whole body. The size of figures is nearly like a human figure. So it's basically becoming like a entrance. And there are doors, as you see at the sides. So it's there are, I think, like more than 12 panels. And then that's how it's constructed. And I used this video as a structure of fairy tale, which had like some years ago, 3 years ago when I did it, or 4 years ago, was very interesting to me to touch the invisible, unspoken, like symbolical sphere which exists, and to talk about emotions, but not so much directing into the logical part of our as a communication sphere. Yeah, okay.
And it was presented as a part of some exhibition, so maybe you can tell us more about the whole exhibition where you show this?
Yeah, I can show you now the whole exhibition, which is called, it was called Crown Off, and some details you can see from all the shows is coming here to Bratislava, and then why it's happening, because I don't have such a big studio. Usually I continue working, even now here I'm developing new ideas, especially with Windows now, but I'm trying to use the exhibition space as a studio. And I think everyone who does especially sculptural work is facing now the situation that we cannot afford big studios, and we have still storage questions, and I think in very close time, I think it will be very rare to see people practicing with real scale and real materials. So I think it's becoming a big challenge. Slideshow. Okay.
So where is this? And when?
So that one is in CEC, Contemporary Center, in Vilnius, and I did the solo show, and it was called Crown Off. So the Crown Off was the idea of to show to talk about the values which are probably not valued anymore. And so that was my crown in my understanding. I was thinking of natural forms of nature itself at that time, that how powerful it is, and that it's like sources like earth or air or fire or water are the first elements, and then our whole understanding since we are kids, it's not alphabet, it's about touch, and that's how we construct the all images, and then we construct the language on top of it. So I thought of this primer base of what it is, what it could be. So this is a courtyard, and in this show I used elements of very symmetrical, like you will see that there are 2 horns, 2 entrances, 2 columns, and it was about this dualistic format. I don't know, like, or how can I call it? But as you see, that was like a kind of inner space on the 2nd floor, and then I made the gate. So I stopped and reconstructed a bit the actual architecture. So you would be stopped by the glass window, and on the other side is another window. So if you see, there is a shape of entrance. It's like a leaf of a tree. So one leaf is a bit like a female leaf or like a linder tree. Another is like more male. I don't know the name of this tree, but I know the tree. And then there was this kind of vestibule, which reminds of this IKEA set, home set, but it was a bit more like a drawing from wood, in the space with the branches and with found wood and found materials. So it was kind of closed as a orangerie. So I stopped this kind of all entrance as I made a space instead of a corridor. And then, so it was very light. The wall was as well covered with the paper. You will see as well in the show downstairs, I use paper as one of the main materials and light. And then you enter the space and there is this huge light box with many lights. And it's around 20 meters wide and 5 meters 50 high. So it was a big screen out of very cheap plastic, like construction plastic. And it was perforated like a tattoo. So the idea was to show, basically in many art spaces we have like no climate change atmosphere or no shadow space. So it's basically if there is autumn or winter, you don't feel it because the light usually comes from above, and you have like artificial light which basically equals everything. So we don't see in objects or paintings or any artworks in twilight. For example, it could be in the light of candles, for example. Why not, And I think it's a big absence. I don't understand why it's this habit happens in total. So I was kind of referring that I kind of needled through that this light sort of comes in, as a night or as a...
I see there are also some birds, is it right? So some birds can penetrate to the exhibition space like here?
Yeah, so there was this summer feast stage, and I invited some groups that were playing, and then there were... It was like a set, like a garden, and I stopped at some point when the money finished and time finished. So it was... Then I did this gallery in the gallery, which was my position as well as an artist, that I invited not professional artists, like autodidact artists inside. Then there was this bird cage, which basically I made a possibility for the birds to fly out and back like pigeons, as you see. And then they were making this nice carpet even nicer. Yeah, and they started to lay eggs, and they made as well sound. So sometimes they were quiet, but sometimes they start to, to dance in there, or like, I don't know, fly, or singing. I don't know, like not singing, but. And there was a video. So it was like the video we saw. It was like a last point where you, going through the whole show, you meet this narrative, and the whole soundtrack was like a tomato sauce to pasta, we can see through, and you see this is the gallery, and I used to run a gallery in Vilnius, like a non-profit gallery, which I know how much it takes time. You work on yourself as well as a curator, so you must know it a bit. But as well, there is this backstage. So I was doing this as well, like imitating, but what it is. Like there are many things on the surface, but there are many things like behind that you need to work with, and it's heavy work. Then we had the wall with the wall painting. It was covered with the paper, then painted. They were asking the technicians, why should we do the paper and then paint it? I said, yeah, it's a small difference, but it's a big difference. Then there were sinks, 2 sinks, running water constantly. So I made this kind of loop of water dripping. It was giving this kind of soft feeling, like always running. Like usually we want to close water, control it. And I thought like, no, it needs to run, just constantly run. Some drawings I did, yeah, and that's how it is a bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what about the materials you are using? They have some specifications? Do you have some materials you prefer?
Yeah, usually I work only with the, I call it transition materials, which you usually never use it as a final material, so it's like paper, cardboard, carton, or plywood, or wood construction wood, which it's not, it's a primer wood. Oh yeah, this is a gallery, and you see that inside, and as well, quite nice works, no? Very strange. And so my friend, artist, was a curator or organizer of the exhibition, so I didn't interrupt it. I just made the volume, I made a title, and then he invited other artists, and yeah, that's how it looks like. And it had its own timetable. So basically you could visit on certain time, but different time than the Contemporary Center of Vilnius had it. Yeah, so that's the work I show.
Mm-hmm. And how was this your non-profit gallery? What was the name and which kind of projects you used to do?
Yeah, so the idea was to open the new space, which would be, I don't know, maybe I need to show some images, but I don't know if I find it now. But
just quickly, like to explain, like what.
Yeah, it was like the idea was to bring 50-50, like 50 artists from abroad, 50 from locals, and to show the actual working process. So basically what people are obsessed right now, because I thought like what it is on the shows or what it is on the books already, it's already 5 years at least old. And it was very interesting to work with artists to show what they really, when they're obsessed, you don't sleep, you just work. And it doesn't matter if it's video, if it's sculpture or graphic works or something else. And it was I was running it for 2 years, then it was, after me, it was living 3 more years.
What was the name?
Malonio, it's like a pleasant street. Mm. Pleasure Street. by the name of the street it was called. It was in like old villa. And the idea was as well, it was my statement that I paid the rent and I didn't get a salary for these 2.5 years, and I did all the renovation, and every time I would invite people with wine and some snacks, but then I was applying for some funding for foreigners to bring their works and to come over and to fly over, but that was my statement that I can support myself with my even family money. I can support this cultural activity, and it's obliged. It must be done like that. And at the same time, when I received some critique about the lights or about something else, I would say, you know, if I would invite you to dinner, you would criticize my dish. It's a bit, you know, strange. So you cannot really criticize when you a guest, you know. So it's just you can come and bring your lights. You can fix your lights. You know, you can help me, my initiative. So that was like a artist. I don't know, a statement a bit position. Okay. Usually I start my work with drawings. And sculpture is basically, it's nearly, so this is kind of, as you see, there is this guy sitting, drawing, and then there are these kind of ideas coming to him, and then he's falling asleep, and you know, all this kind of stuff happens. So you're kind of getting obsessed with some narrations that it starts on the paper, but then it becomes a reality. If you develop it further, it becomes a real thing. And I don't know what it is, but at some point I enjoy it. And yeah, many different things can happen. So I do sometimes animation as well. So there was this character, for example. Yeah. And to come back to the sculpture, oops, that's it. Pencil, sorry. I need to open one more. Slide. I need to find where is this slide. Yeah. I'll show you like last 3 works I did in recently.
Where?
Different parts, but it's about the light. So I started to work with light a lot as a sculptural element. Instead of usually that you have a sculpture and the light is hitting object and you have a shadow and then you capture it with the photo camera, I started to rethink it that it should be probably used opposite, that not opposite, but to treat light not as a source as we see here, but as sculptural element next to bronze, stone, or whatever, like classically understood by how do I skip that show? Bo. Okay, so I'll show. Yeah, okay. So this was in Kaunas. What do you see? Do you see something? Yeah, I did this show in one non-profit gallery, big space in Kaunas. And it was one of the examples that I would try to talk about light as an object. And then it was one of the first tries that I used the sculpture that you can relate with whole your body, that you can enter the sculpture and experience it nearly from inside. So it was this kind of yellow room. Then there was this other project I did, which was following like a few months later. I did this kind of, I call it Sun Conservatory. It's like a ice cream place, could be, or something, but I tried to reject the values of architecture. Usually has like a domestic values, that we sleep, we eat, we abuse the space all the time. We take everything from it. So we do roof, we do very, we domesticifying it. Yeah. And then I thought, what if we remove all those levels and just I tried to think that what the architectural form would be same as art piece, as a sculpture, as a form that you could experience with your body. And still, of course, with the size, it becomes quite architectural or kind of housey style. But yeah, as well, the light is my tool to work with and to talk with. Yeah, then
you're using often these motifs from the nature. Which role they have? Like pieces of trees or animals or plants?
So usually what happens to me when I'm making drawings, I hear music. And when I hear music, I hear like a tonality. It's usually tonality. And then to express it, I start to construct some images. So there are some characters or there are some forms. But it's based on expression of sound, actually. So when I work, I try to warm up, usually listen to music or to dance sometimes in my studio, just naturally, never do it artificially. But then it comes up this I would call it the state that you don't do mistakes anymore. You just, it comes out, something that you just need to capture. And that's a studio practice that probably everyone artist does. That was in São Paulo last year, the show, the work, which is as well is like a three-dimensional architectural shape. There's like a drawing in the space. At the same time, as you said, you have. I use basically two elements, which I refer in recent works with the notion of human nature and of nature itself, because like I'm trying to sometimes to understand that we are humans, we are we are nature ourselves, but we can reflect on it, so we can construct out of it something. And this clash is very interesting as a topic for me. So you see both. It's not just nature, but it's human nature, or human in the nature, or nature in the human head. Yeah.
And this was in the Sao Paulo biennial. There was some topic connected with your practice of the biennial, or?
Yeah, this exhibition was very interesting. Like the whole idea was brought. I think was very nice initiative that curator invited 10 artists, and then each 10 artists would bring 10 more artists making an island, and somehow to intervene with the works with each other. So the thematics, like a directly thematic, there was not, but it was when I talked with the main artist who invited me, the Argentinian artist, she told that it's there was this emotional level that or value that I was there, and I couldn't describe how it's related with, but it was a big challenge because everyone was producing new work, and nobody knew how it's gonna bring things together, how it would look like, and yeah, it was experience, definitely. Yeah. So as well, I'm working as well a lot with perception. So there is a scale, how you see things. So for example, even this circle, like how you see through the circle is very different than what you usually see through the square. And I was thinking, it looks very Asian, I know, but it's in total, I think like we see in circle. Why do we have square computer? I don't know. It's just very strange format. Why is not circle? Because it's way more natural. No, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, was the process. I did one video as well with that. So you see, there were these windows of Niemeyer. You see the famous architect, Brazilian architect, was so beautiful. So I thought I saw those jungles behind the window, and I got home, and I went to the lake, and I made the Niemeyer window on the lake. So it's like the water, which becomes white, like a snow. I used it as a white paper where you can do a drawing, like an ink drawing, like a footprints or something like that. So I did this kind of drawing of this window and what it would be to see winter through the Nehemiah, or like just thinking as well of Bruegel paintings, like a landscape itself through the screen, exactly again like a square. So my friends were filming, and then we had this video, and I don't know how to play this video, but there was I did few videos with those windows. Yeah. Okay, I think I showed you quite something for now. It's enough probably.
And yes, you can show us this project you have done in Venice
In
Biennial
Venice,
in
okay.
2017. You represented Lithuanian pavilion.
Yeah. Ooh, so with Venice, I don't know, like somebody has experience, probably we can share after, but...
And how it started, that you was selected through some open call, or...
Yes, how it works, I found out just after, but every country has a bit different politics and policy, but the policy depends on the size of a country. So usually big countries like European big countries like Germany, France, Poland even, they first choose the curator, some jury choose the curator, and then curator chooses what he or she wants. It can be American artists representing or African artists representing Poland, for example. It could be done like that. So it's uncontrollable after. Mm-hmm. It's really a big debate now, like sometimes it happens that, so it becomes a political statement and stuff like that. So artists cannot apply. If, for example, in Finland, which is quite a way smaller population, like 10 times less than Germans, for example. So they have open call for everyone. We, for example, the Baltic state countries like Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, we have, as a small countries, we have open calls for institutions, and then the institutions over Kunsthalle would be applying for cultural ministry with a proposal, but they would, inside they would do a selection, to propose one artist. Mm-hmm. And somehow after this solo show in Contemporary Art Center, the director or someone proposed me into this kind of, to propose my work, and it happened that I was selected from the CEC, but it was 50-50 with another artist, like a young, very upcoming, nice artist. So it's such a game. It's just like there was half a vote difference, I heard. So, but at the same time, like as an artist, you get involved in so many stories that you don't want to deal with. There is no time anymore to work. It's just to find the space, to communicate, and then so I was involved with everything because all the questions ends up with you, and I don't have such a big experience, but as well I want to control everything somehow. So there was this Kuala. Basically, out of 3 locations, they were cancelled, and then we stayed with the last one because the limit of money, it's you need to rent something in the expensive city for half a year, find flats and ship things. So I did this kind of architecture inside, like a shop that you enter. The space was super difficult. The most difficult space I worked ever, because it was a square with very high ceilings. So everything you bring looks too small because of the ceiling, and too big because like the depth is so big and it's so narrow that it's nearly impossible to compose something dynamic. It's like very central, and there was the altar with Saint Mary and Jesus. So it was 4 big columns. It was a challenge, yeah, definitely. And to deal with Italians was even more hard. Yeah. So as you see as well, some things traveled just from my studio. I ended up like having no time to produce what I wanted, and at the same time, like you need to produce with 10,000 everything. So it's when you include some technicians, you end up fast with 0. Or Yeah.
And what was the title of this show, of this presentation?
It was
It was R.
capital R.
Yes,
Yeah, it's.
R.
So I was thinking in total what it means, the symbol, like a language, written language. So it's made out of symbols, and if you take these Latin letters, they they constructed out of geometrical forms: triangle, circle, and square. And all the alphabet is created like that. And it's because probably one of the reasons is as well, it's like if in Arab countries you write it in Persia, for example, with the brush, we have it Greek or Roman way that we chisel it. We go into stone and then we carve it so that the light, when it hits the stone, you see the shadow and the light part of it. So it's like, and as well, very geometrical forms that they come out easily and you can read it. Yeah. So in that way, I tried to touch the sphere about unspoken, invisible things, to talk about those things. So okay, the altar, I hide it behind the wall. As you see, it was super difficult. Anything you would bring in front of altar, it has very strange feeling, and connotation, and it's very, as I mentioned to you, very central. That was the second floor, which was 7 meters high. It was, super difficult. And I made this kind of kite structure. Like I wanted at least to make this architecture, and it was form of R letter, but then there was this head, and from the head, woman head as a pot was growing like this big plant. At the same time, as well, you need to think of the storage. So I was constructing some parts of installation that it would be everything inside as a storage room, because you come up with the materials and with tools, so you need to solve things like that. It's interesting. And so you will see probably downstairs some quite few elements coming back from all the shows I did in the last 5 years maybe. But even this structure, because of the humidity and heat, all the papers suddenly started to break, and then it was funny. It was really, really stressful. Anyway, that was.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And what about your PhD research on your work? You told me that you are working on a PhD thesis or work in Vilnius Fine Art Academy.
Yeah, I do work. I'm doing my PhD studies right now, and my subject is about actually the knowledge that body brings. It's about the body that knows, and it's based on mainly on the phenomenological philosophy, like Merleau-Ponty I'm referring, and another analytic person from South America, from Brazil, Sulej Rolnik, and some critics from architectural critics. So I'm kind of trying to develop to touch the sphere of mainly of unrational sphere, that we can transmit information in many different forms, and aesthetical form is very important, strong thing that we sometimes trying to deny, and other forms next to it. So this is kind of briefly a subject.
Yeah, and you're also teaching. What you are teaching? Which
I'm
subjects?
doing everything. I'm teaching. Oh my God, it's like yeah. So art is my hobby. Just physically, I'm not living out of it totally. So I'm supporting it. My activity so I need to do quite a few jobs. And one of them, it's like I'm teaching in art academy, and I used to teach in art school quite a long time before, and now I'm doing PhD. But as well, I'm doing some extra jobs for cinema or for construction building works, for basically for theater or cinema.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and can you tell us something about the Lithuanian art scene, or Vilnius, how it is as a city for artists, which kind of institutions or galleries there are?
Yeah, so there is this, I would say, that's where we met probably, no? In CC,
Yes,
Contemporary
yes.
Center, which is, it used to be Artist Union building. Then suddenly few young people just kind of took initiative, and they started to flirt with that institution, and basically they took it over, half of the building, and then they they made a coalition, and then they made separation. So they became as a separate structure, and at that time the group of young people, they made everything, but I think they moved in a very nice direction, and up till now I think it's a very good institution, but not only locally but internationally. Like a lot of artists have big respect for this space because they produced a lot of artists. They produced new works over there, so it was like working as a Kunsthalle, like as well what you have. So that basically it's the space doesn't have the collection, but you can improvise. So you can really do new things, and you can play with the with the results. So then you can see that those artists are continuing the researches or like tryouts what they did, but sometimes very brave and very interesting results were coming out. So it's slow process. Like you need audience, you need articles like magazines, you need public, not artistic audience, but as well like a wider public. And this takes time. You need to build up. So, for example, this year, Lithuanian Pavilion in Venice won the Lion, but it's like no surprise. It's slow work of many people, like in many steps. It doesn't come in one day. Like even if you inject, like if you would inject money, it wouldn't happen. It's like slow, invisible structural work, and then like I'm very happy that I'm here. And then, what you do. It's I think it's very important. Whatever you like or don't like my work, but it's all of us, we viewers as well, visitors and artists. We step by step we're moving that stone, and then suddenly you can again collect all the dust and make out of it something like a step. So one artist would contain all those ideas and then just would make a step, and then everyone helps him to make it. It just doesn't come up from sky. This I don't at least believe in this. So this is my gallery, like I had in.
It was somewhere in the countryside or in city center?
No, it was in city center. Mm-hmm. It was not center. It's like a bit of like this villa suburb. Mm-hmm. This is it. A lot of projects. Every month a project. It was crazy.
You used to live there?
No, they used to live one.
You?
No. I was sleeping one night because I was doing some project, and then there was a story that there is a ghost, and I started to believe after that night that there is a ghost because every minute I would fall asleep. I was painting one sculpture upstairs for cinema, and then I was waiting until it's drying because it's 2-component. I would go to sleep a bit. Every minute I would sleep, there is someone taking me by leg off, and then I was like, again, like trying to sleep, and something happens. It was scary. No, funny. I mean, I don't know, but it was a story. Maybe because of paint. That was epoxy paint. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting right now. People remember it as a very special place and blah blah. But I said I remember that it was very simple. It was nothing very special. But in the mind of people, it stayed as I think in time it looks better. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is it.
And there are now some similar places in Vilnius or in Lithuania in general?
I think there are activities, but it's difficult, especially with the gentrification. It's probably same in Bratislava. It's hard to find a space, and the municipality doesn't help at all, like with sharing the space. So you need to pay big rents, and then it becomes a big obstacle because,
to have continuity,
Yeah. But for sure, like if it must exist. Those spaces that you can experiment, you know, and play and come with new results and new forms, and not to be afraid to fail, you know, and it's not that anything goes. No, it's something opposite, that goes only the things that, but you just can measure with the audience. It's just both ways form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And which are the other interesting artists from Lithuania you prefer or you appreciate? You have some, or maybe from older generation?
Yeah, so
like you have Fluxus history, for example, which is very important, which is not very known here, maybe.
Yeah, I think, but there are quite few directions. I think one of the things as well is very interesting, that we have this Fluxus, which is like kind of playful and more performative form of art, but coming from New York. But at the same time, it was in Kaunas as well. It was the capital of Lithuania at that time because Polish occupied Vilnius. I don't know. It was funny, but. Those guys who moved there, they kept contact with, even in Soviet times, so they were bringing some information or some notes to already back then to the actual art scene and literature scene. So it was not surprised, but with some forms it was unknown and it was never accepted. Mm-hmm. So there is as well a group of artists that they are known abroad, but in Lithuania they are nothing. Mm-hmm. It's as well happens that, and then we have as well, like I would say, we can always split artists like a regional, national, international, multinational, like a global. That, and usually the global artists using the footage of cultural footage of actual spots, like it would be Brazil, if it would be like Slovakia or Lithuania, but. Then it would be nearly sold as a deficit, you know. So it's like a political statement, stuff like that. But we have few artists like Narkevičius, like so. It's nearly a historical political work dealing with the socialism and communism regimes topics. But in actual scene inside of a country, it has no resonance at all. So it's it depends what we are talking about. Like so, there is this. Inner scene and outside scene, I think there are quite different things. But in total, it's very big variety of different ways of working. And one of the things that is very actual up till now, it was conceptual art. That actually one of the reasons, because it didn't happen during the mid-war or after the Second World War. What basically way more happened in this part of Eastern Europe, if I can use this term, Eastern Europe. So, or we didn't have in Lithuania at all surrealism or pop art, which happened, for example, and surrealism, some forms of surrealism and pop art in Estonia, and it's still a gap. So basically, some artist still needs to fill. One day, those blocks will be filled. So there are these kind of structures, yeah. Well, you've been to Lithuania, you can tell a bit more. You met artists, you know more.
Well,
you're more objective.
Well, actually, yes, I was there, but it was that basically the institution which invited us, Kaunas Biennial, gave us the list like who to visit. So then slowly we discovered other artists. So it was not that I know the Lithuanian art scene. That's why I'm asking you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, for the end, I will tell just a bit this gallery and nice thing. Okay, you asked about artists. So at first, it was that I was inviting artists, and then after 1 year, artists themselves, they were coming with their proposals. So, like famous artists, they were, or my tutors even, we would come, sculptors or like. Other specialties artists. There was not directly my professor, but the professor from academy. He did this kind of stone letters. And this guy, it's a legend from Lithuania. It's Navakas, which is Mindaugas Navakas, like a very cool, strong character. He does those big sculptures. What he did this cupboard. with the dishes. And he did those dishes, he did graffiti slogans, yeah, on the dishes. So he bought, there were 12 sets of dishes, and because the graffiti artist, attacking his sculptures, so he said, I will do revenge. What happened, this is the guy, what happened, that's his sculptures, like I think, came all the scene of graffiti guys and all the scene of artists. And I thought this house will be destroyed after, because there were these guys of 2 meters, like smoking joints constantly. I was like, wow. And then we started to talk a bit, and then they found this kind of nearly discussion. They were checking the climate, and they found this kind of humor and positions, and then everything was fine. It was a nice project, yeah, very nice project. Good. I don't know what else to tell.
Okay, Žilvinas, thank you. Maybe there are some questions from the public?
Everyone wants to go home. Yeah.
Maybe if not, we would like to invite you again Thursday at 6 to see exhibition The Fog in Kunsthalle LAB. And thank you again for coming.
Yeah, please come, spend time and
bring your friends, families. Yeah.